This video is affiliate link to Brush Galaxy, fantastic brush subscription service. You're going to get access to over 20,000 brushes, tons of different brush categories. Start your 3 months trial. Now there's a link down in the description and get access to up to 12 brush packs straight away. Okay, so I finally got my hands on the new iPad Pro. This year there's 2 different versions. There's the 11-inch one and this 12.9-inch version. Now normally there's not a lot to distinguish between the 2 different versions. However, this year there's a different screen technology in the larger version. This boasts a liquid retina XDR display, which is like lots of little mini LEDs behind the LCD screen, so it highlights certain areas. So it should, in theory, create more blacks and more whites within the display and create a more vibrant experience. I'm going to compare it to the older iPad Pro and see whether really there is a noticeable difference. But first, we've got to get the wrapper open, we've got to do the unboxing. Happen to have gone for the 256 gig, and this is the Wi-Fi plus cellular version. I've gone for the silver. And then we've got the typical kind of iPad Pro look. Now it's not really changed a lot aesthetically from the outside. You've got all the same aesthetics, the same look to it. This is slightly different for me because I've not had the cellular version before. Within the box we've got the typical things, we've got the power brick, or the plug, and we've got the USB-C connector. So I've given myself a few days just to really compare the 2 iPads. We've got the older iPad and we've got the new 2021 iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch version with the new screen technology and everything else. Now I'm going to be coming at this pretty much exclusively from an artist's point of view. I'm going to be comparing really the differences between the 2 screens. So what are the differences in terms of the spec? Well, we have what's called the Liquid Retina XDR mini LED display. Now really in essence what that means is instead of having the entire screen illuminating behind the Liquid Retina display, it actually focuses the light where it wants it most, which means it can actually switch off some of the lights in certain areas and it will appear blacker because there's no light in that area. And it can also really focus the light into other areas and it gets extra bright. So you get a much sharper contrast between the darks and the light colours, and obviously then a more vibrant kind of colours coming through as well. So in terms of how much brighter, well, the older iPad Pros get a maximum of 600 nits, and that's for the whole screen, and for the newer one it's got 1000 nits brightness. But because it can focus it in certain areas, those focused areas, if it's the rest of it's dark, that really bright bit can go up to 1600 nits. So it can go significantly brighter in some places. But that is only for the 12.9 model, and that's the whole point of this comparison, this review really. It comes with the M1 chip, and that's the new chip that's in the new iMacs, and it's going to be in all the future sort of Mac models that are coming up. So it's going to be blazingly fast. It's too powerful as it is at the minute for this device. There just aren't the apps to take advantage of that. Obviously that's going to change. I use the app Procreate, and they're coming up with all sorts of different things that you can do in terms of importing 3D models, and then you can actually paint on the surface of 3D models and things. That's coming up with the latest update of Procreate 5.2. I think that's due out pretty imminent as well. We have a slight difference in storage. So the maximum storage you can get with the newer iPad is 2 terabyte, and the maximum previously was 1 terabyte. And if you do get and you still have the option of 1 terabyte in the new model as well. If you do get either the 1 or the 2 terabyte model, you will also get 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is double the amount you'll get with the lower size or lower storage options. But even those lower storage options, the storage options below a terabyte, so your 512 and your 256 and your 128, they will all come with 8 gigs of RAM, which is an extra 2 gigs of RAM on the other models from last year. So it's at least 33.3% extra RAM than it was before. So what does that mean in practice? It means when you're having layers, you're going to be able to get a ton more layers. You're going to be able to have bigger size canvases, so you can go really super detailed and print things absolutely massive, and you can also juggle lots of layers at the same time. I'm only really talking specifically about Procreate because that's the app I use for my tutorials and for my own artwork as well. But it's a really useful indicator. It doesn't actually show that you can get more, and it hasn't actually been updated yet to take advantage of all extra RAM. But it is imminent, and I presume it will come with the 5.2 update for Procreate, and then we're going to see that actually you can get a ton more layers with the newer iPad Pro. So the real difference for me is going to be the screen difference. Now I've opened a square within Procreate. Now I've got the camera deliberately set to autofocus and auto white balance. Now it's going to kick out of touch a little bit in places, but I've put it on that deliberately. So as we go from a white screen to a black screen, it's going to change with it, so you can actually follow the differences. Now probably on camera you can see a slight colour shift between the two anyway. So there's an older one, the older iPad Pro, and here's the up-to-date newer one. And you've almost got a slightly different, warmer hue to that, but it is actually noticeably a little bit brighter here as well. And I have actually put it on maximum brightness on both devices, just so you can see it's fair, the brightness is on full. Now one thing that I have noticed that is different is the actual edges. So you can see this when you have a super white background, and I'm going to put this on full screen so you can see this perhaps a little bit better as well. So I'll just zoom in, and again you can really see the brightness difference here as well. But actually around the very edge of this screen on the newer version, it actually feels like just about 2 millimeters around the edge there's almost a little bit of a shadow, so almost like it gets up to the edge and then it just fades into the border, into the bezel. Whereas on the older model you get full brightness right up until the bezel, and then you get a complete contrast between the two. It's a strange effect, and I'll perhaps just try and show it a little bit more close to camera. It does actually shaded at the actual corners just a little bit. Now I'll compare that with the older model. So when you get up to the edge here, it's super sharp. It goes straight from the white into the black bezel. And I'll show you this again. But when you get on the newer one, now it's very visible in person. You almost have to squint on camera perhaps, but you go from the bright white and then it just fades a little bit or has a shadow, and then it goes onto the bezel itself. Now it's not a deal breaker. I don't see as it's such a big deal, but it's just a strange little feature that you probably will notice. I can't imagine it's going to bother me that much, but it is still something that's different. I'm going to go back into the mode where we can see the options, and I'm going to change now just so you can now see what it looks like when it's completely black. And I'll do the same, double tap in that area, and it goes completely black. And I've put the camera on this setting so that it automatically adjusts. And it's slightly exaggerating the camera now, but I think it emphasizes how black on here is a different prospect than black on here. Now, like I said, it's slightly exaggerated the difference there, but it's still very noticeable by the naked eye. So you can't even see the bezel difference really compared to the black on the newer version, whereas you can definitely see a difference between the blackest of blacks that it can muster and the bezel here. Now bear in mind I've got this on the brighter setting, so if I turn this down to probably an area more likely to use it indoors, put it about halfway, and then the black is a much closer kind of black to the bezel, but it's still different, and you'd have to take it down pretty low in terms of the brightness for those two to start looking more equivalent. But you can see the whites are not very bright at that point. But certainly on max brightness, there's a big difference between the bezel and the black. So that's another difference. I think you just about can detect this now. So I've done this so that you can see the halo effect. Now again, it's a slightly exaggerated thing on camera now, admittedly, but because it's not quite as super black around the white, it means that you don't get quite as much of a ghosting of a halo around that. The camera is slightly exaggerating that, to be fair, but on this one, again, it's slightly exaggerating it. In fact, the first place I noticed it was on the little floating bar at the bottom. Now, when you freshly toggled it, I did notice on the brighter setting that there was almost like a glow. I guess because most of the pixels or the light is turned off in a certain area, most of it, the light is focused around here, and when it dims you can kind of see there is a halo around it even when it's on its dimmed place, and certainly when it's bright it creates more of a halo around there, as it does when you've created a brush mark like that. Now, is it going to be a major problem? No, because actually it's nowhere near as distinct as it is on camera, but it's something that I've not noticed on the older version, especially when I notice it here. It's completely absent here, and when it's on its darkest black there's no glow, there's no halo around that when you don't see it on camera, whereas this one, even on its dim mode, I can still see to my eye that area around it is illuminated. Now again, I don't think that's going to be a major issue, to be fair, but still, it's a difference. Right, you can probably notice there's a reflection there. That's just the reflection of the camera. It's no damage to the screen, thank goodness. Now in terms of any other differences, well, I've opened my images, so I'll show you one of my images. I don't know how noticeable again it's going to be, but I promise you, to my eye, the blacks are definitely blacker, and the lighter bits are noticeably a little bit lighter as well than it is on the older version. And I have tested it out with watching a couple of things on Netflix, and it is richer, it is sharper, it is more immersive when you're watching media on the newer version than it is the old version. So the sound's better, the picture quality is better. In terms of the drawing experience on the iPad, there isn't any difference. They both use the Apple Pencil too. It feels exactly the same. They've both got the 120 frames per second refresh rate, so it's really smooth. The animation is perfect. The speed at which the latency of the actual mark that you make on the screen is not affected. It's no different on each device. So the latency really isn't an issue, whether you're using a really big brush or a really small brush, working really quickly. Both devices are super fast and super efficient with the Apple Pencil. It's really not going to be any difference whatsoever in terms of that drawing experience. The only difference is going to be when the apps keep getting updated, or these apps are inventing new ways of using all that RAM, all that power, then I guess in a few years' time, the older iPads are going to become a little slower, aren't going to manage quite as well, whereas this is going to be really zippy and keep up with all the latest developments. Now, is it going to be worth upgrading? I guess is another question. If you have any of the older iPad Pros, the ones that are side charging and pairing with the Apple Pencil 2, I honestly not sure there's much of a reason that you'd need to upgrade. Now, I do tend to keep up to date with the latest iPads because of the channel, but aside from that, I wouldn't be spending over £1,000. And bear in mind, the 2TB version with all the other latest and greatest things gets you up to over £2,000 and over $2,000. If you're coming from an older iPad Pro or just a standard iPad, or it's the first device you're planning on getting, then there's even more reasons to love this as a media device, as an art device. I do think it's brilliant. The iPad Pro, or the iPads in general, are head and shoulders, in my opinion, above all the other tablets around, both in terms of the actual Apple Pencil and the device itself, but all the apps that are made for it, like Procreate. I just think it's an amazing device personally, and I'm not paid by anyone to say any of these things. It's just my opinion as an artist and a YouTuber. So if your money allows, then it's a fantastic device to get, and it is better than the last one, but not so much so that it's worth paying out and shelling out all that extra money. Maybe wait, see what the next version does, see if that's different enough again. I'm looking forward to a time where they update the Apple Pencil, maybe the Apple Pencil 3, and see what changes that could bring potentially. We're not there yet. When we get there, I promise you I'll be doing a review of that as well. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. I hope that's been informative. Do check out my other videos. I do a ton of tutorial videos. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on my Facebook group, or join my Facebook group and share any of the tutorials that you followed along with and the results with me and the group there. All relevant links are down in the description of this video. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed. I shall catch you back here soon. See you later.